So thank you everyone for joining. Today we're going to focus on drawing basics in Onshape. So we're going to focus on building your first drawings, 2D drawings in Onshape, and how to get started, all the process of dimensions and view creation and annotations and all those details, including some details on templates and a number of other little things as well. So really going to focus heavily on drawings today, 2D drawings, of course. As I always say with these webinars, we really encourage you to ask any questions that you have. If you have a questions dialogue and you go to webinar panel, feel free to type anything in. I'll do my best from time to time to stop and make sure to answer any questions that you have. If I haven't answered your questions, I'll stick around and make sure after the webinar is over that I've made sure to address each one of them. So again, ask any questions that you'd like as we're jumping through things here. So let's get started now. Before I get into the topic of the day, there are a few things I'd like to mention about Onshape in general. So for those new users, the first thing I like to mention is our mission statement, and that is getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere you happen to be. So this means, iPads, iPhones, Android tablets, Android phones, Linux, Mac, Windows, Chromebooks, really accessibility to your CAD data from any device you happen to be sitting in front of. And this also means working collaboratively or working together with others, right? Working with multiple users. Because the data is in the cloud, we can simultaneously work together, which has really never been done before in CAD. So again, our mission, getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. So now, the other things I always like to point out about Onshape is, we do consider ourselves professional 3D CAD. And when you think of professional 3D CAD, you think of really three pieces: parts, assemblies, and of course drawings, which is what we're going to focus on here today. So we do have all three major pieces. Some things that I always like to point out that's really unique about Onshape is if you watch, you'll see Onshape evolve very quickly. Roughly every 3 weeks, Onshape is updated. And it's not something that the user has to do. There's no installs or updates. You just literally refresh the browser and you're going to see new functionality being added. So we're going to move very quickly in adding new functionality, and you're going to see it evolve, very fast. The other thing I always like to point out is, version control is built in with Onshape. You don't have to have a separate data management solution. There's no check-in, check-out, or read-write permissions or any of those issues typically associated with traditional file-based CAD. Also, for those coming from other CAD systems, we can read and write common CAD formats that are out there today. So STEP, IGES, Parasolid, SolidWorks, Inventor, Creo, a number of different formats that are very common today. We can import and export. Now, in addition to 3D formats, we can also import and export DXF and DWGs. So worth pointing out, especially for the topic of today, with drawings, we can import and export DXF and DWGs as well. Okay, quick questions. There is capability for thread generation coming up soon. You can create threads. It's just a manual process today. We've talked about tools for automating that, absolutely. It is worth mentioning you can create threads today. It's just a manual process of a sweep and a helix. So, but yes, it has been discussed before. No specific timeline on when something like that might happen, but do realize that we see the need. All right, so my last bullet point here is entirely new methods of collaboration. So if you're new to Onshape and you haven't shared your document yet, I definitely recommend it. There's a lot of benefits to the sharing aspect of Onshape. The fact that you can work in real time with other users, 2 or 3 or multiple people can work together in the same assembly or in the same part. So there's a lot of benefits to working collaboratively inside of an Onshape document, and definitely worth trying out if you haven't tried it yet. All right, so enough about that. What we're going to talk about today, as I mentioned before, it's very much an intro to drawings. I want to walk you through basic drawing creation, choosing a template, inserting the simple views, dimensions, of course, notes, center line, center marks, annotations in general. So, also datum features and tolerance symbols and things like that. Also import and export. How do we handle importing DXFs and DWGs, and how do we export DXFs and DWGs? And then lastly, templates. How do we manage templates inside of Onshape? And when I'm referring to templates, I'm referring to the drawing template. So that's really the goal. We have a lot of different things to discuss, although it goes very quickly. So Let's jump right into it. Now, before I get into any topics specific to creating drawings, I want to mention, and I've already discussed it briefly, what we can import and what we can export. So I've already mentioned we can import DXF and DWG files. So if you have, those formats and you want to bring them in, you can, and you can even edit those natively inside of Onshape. And then, of course, we can export DXF and DWG as well as PDF. So we can save Onshape drawings out as PDFs as well. Okay, so let's get started. Now, as I mentioned before, we're really going to start with the basics. So just assuming here that you don't have a lot of experience with drawings, forgive me if you've had some time in it. But maybe you've done some basic part modeling, maybe some assemblies, but now you're ready to make a 2D drawing, to actually show tolerances and all the details needed for manufacturing. So where do I get started? So I have this simple part, and this is the one I'd like to walk you through for the sake of this webinar. We're going to make a drawing of this suspension bracket. Now the first step and the first thing to realize about Onshape drawings is they're just another tab in your document. So just like the part or the assembly or anything that you've imported, it will show up as a tab across the bottom. So just like creating a new part or creating a new assembly, to create a new drawing, you go down to the Create tab icon on the bottom left, and you'll see the option to Create Drawing. So this is, of course, your first step, and here is where you choose your template. Now, initially, you're going to be greeted with a few different options. What I'd recommend if you're just getting started, you really don't know anything about the details, and you don't have your own template yet, is to use one of the Onshape provided templates. So on the filter here, you'll see Onshape, and you can choose one of the Onshape provided templates. Some things that are important to keep in mind, excuse me, we have, of course, inch units and metric units. So it's important to point out, if you're using an inch part, make sure to choose the corresponding template, so inch and millimeters. And of course, all ISO templates are metric. So if you're using inch parts, make sure to choose a template with inch in the name. Okay. So we have ANSI templates, we have ISO templates that are just, again, these are kind of out-of-the-box generic drawing templates that are a good place to get started. So this is where I'd start. Some things I like to point out here is you can also build a custom template, quote unquote, on the fly. There's a custom template option. And basically what this allows you to do is build your own, template with a number of different settings. So I can say, okay, this is an ANSI, size C, with this, units, these style of decimal separators, first or third angle projection. So you have a number of different options. The common one that gets brought up here is, what if I don't want a title block, or what if I don't want any of those details? And you have that option here. So you can exclude title block, or you can change a number of different zone settings, for instance. So this allows you to build kind of a custom template on the fly. So if that's what you're looking for, you can do that. Now, there's also a way I'm going to discuss later for bringing in your own templates. I'm going to show you that a bit later on. But again, of course, the important thing when you're getting started, what template do I want to use? In this case, I'm just going to start with a simple ANSI C inch template, the Onshape provided templates. I hit OK, and it creates, of course, a blank drawing. So as I mentioned before, it's just another tab in your document. You'll see the tab here on the bottom for the new drawing. And by default, it's asking me what part or assembly do I want to insert a drawing view of? So I have the drawing view command up. It says insert part, so I choose which part I'd like to insert a view of, in this case the rocker right hand. And then I can select the view and then place the actual view just by left clicking. Okay. So you can place just by left clicking in the graphics, and it will actually attach it to that spot in space. A question that's popped up: is there a way of showing dual unit dimensions? Haven't been able to find so, and I believe this may be a limitation. We could discuss workarounds and things you might be able to do, but I believe an option, so to speak, for dual unit dimensions is still a limitation. Okay, so I've inserted my first view. Real simple front view. Again, when you first create your drawing, it's going to automatically take you into that drawing view command, and you can select, the part you want to insert and the view, the orientation, front, top, right, whatever it is that you'd like. So we have our standard front view here, and what I'd like to do is project off of this front to create a top, a right, and an isometric view. Now I can go back to standard drawing view, which is the very first icon in the toolbar. Excuse me, not first, but first one in the drawing views here, drawing view. And I can select another standard view if I wanted to, or you can project off of already existing views, okay, which is the next icon over. You'll see projected view. I select projected view. I select the view I want to project off of, in this case the front. Then move my cursor in the direction I want to project. Okay, very important. If you move to the right, you get a projection in that direction. Okay, so definitely worth pointing out. Make sure to move your cursor in the right direction. When you're satisfied with the location, just left click, and you have your view. So again, projected view is relatively simple. Select the view you want to project off of, move the cursor in the direction you want to project, and left click to place it. Okay, we'll do that one more time, actually two more times. So projected view, select the front, and this time we'll create a right view here. And projected view, we'll create an isometric view. So we have our front, top, right, and an isometric view, pretty standard orthogonal view views for a drawing. Now the question has come up, and it comes up often, well, what about the default scale? How do I change the scale associated with these views? And the easiest way to do this is to right click and go to the properties, and you'll see scale. Right? So I can change this, for instance, to a 1:1 scale very quickly. Okay. So the key thing there is right click inside of the view, and you'll see the option for properties. By the way, I just showed the projected view command. You can also do that, by the way, from the right click menu. So I can right click a view and create a projected view right off of that. Okay, so let's move on. The next one in my list is an auxiliary view, and like you can imagine, it references an auxiliary edge, for instance, as a way to project off of and create a view. So for example, if I want to create a view referencing this edge, for example, I could select auxiliary, select the edge, and it will create a view projecting off of that edge. So very useful if you're trying to create a view referencing a specific edge of the model and you want to create a view that's normal to that reference. Okay. Now, some questions to come up. Scaling independent views. The reason all of these moved together is because they were projected off of each other. So the projected view creates a parent-child dependency. You can go in and insert the views manually if you'd like, and you wouldn't have that behavior. But it's worth pointing out that the reason they all change at once is because they were all projected off of that parent front view. Okay. Doesn't this assume that you've already created the three-dimensional object? What if you wanted to start from a blank page? With Onshape, it's really built around the blank page is the 3D model. That's where you start. In most 3D CAD systems, you start with a 3D part, build it, and then make a drawing of that 3D part. And that's the typical workflow that you take. Now you do have some simple, basically lines and centerline tools for creation at the drawing level for creating geometry, but it's really intended as a way to document your already existing 3D model. Okay, so this is auxiliary view, right? As I mentioned before, you're selecting an already existing edge and it projects off of that edge to create a view. The next one I want to show you is section view. I select section view. Now it's important to point out there is an option to section view. So you select section and you have vertical or horizontal options. Right, so you can set vertical, horizontal section views, and of course you can also set the section view label to whatever you'd like. Once you have those defined, it's just a matter of attaching it to the correct position. As you move your cursor over a view, for example, you're going to see it snap to these different positions, right? And the idea behind this is it's giving you feedback, allowing you to attach to important pieces of the part. So for instance, as I move my cursor over it, you'll see it actually snaps to the center of that hole. That's actually a circular boss. So it allows me to real quickly attach it to the point I'd want to. So I've placed it in the correct position. It's a vertical section view. It looks good. I left click, and that creates the section view. What's important to point out is the direction of the section view is dependent on the direction that you drag your cursor. So if I move my cursor to the other side, it flips the direction of the section view. And that's a question that often comes up. How do I reverse the direction? Move the cursor in the opposite direction. Okay, remember, you can always move these views afterwards if you don't care for the position. Okay, left click. And now I have my section view. Okay. Again, the key thing there is snapping it to the right entity, placing it where you'd like. Remember that you can left click and drag and move these later on. Right? So you don't have to, you're not forced to leave it, or you can manipulate and clean these up later on as you see fit. Another question, can you create a section view off of an edge? Does it have to be vertical or horizontal? Right now it has to be vertical or horizontal. That is something that we're definitely very aware of, and something we hope to add in the near future. But as of today, section views have to be horizontal and vertical. Okay, moving on. When you move, this is a good question that's come up. After moving, can you realign the views? By default, when you move them, the alignment maintains. So if they were aligned to begin with, they will stay aligned. And this is a good point because, for instance, if I drag the front view here, because the top was projected off of it, it moves as well. So definitely worth pointing out, these are aligned. You can break the alignment in the right-click menu. That's an option in the right-click menu, and that will break the alignment between different views. But by default, if the alignment's there, when you move the child view, so to speak, will move with it. Can you show an axis on the drawing? And an axis in our drawings would be in the form of a 2-point centerline or a line-to-line centerline. So in this case, I could do a line-to-line, which we're going to get to in a second, and select the two lines of this cylinder and get a center line between them, although there's one in there. So that's how I'd create an axis to reflect the center of a bore, for instance. Okay, so moving on, I've covered section views. Again, you're really just attaching that line to wherever you want to create the view, left click, and then move and place the section view where you'd like it. The next one, again, very simple, is the detail view. And the detail view, the key thing with it is it's really just a matter of drawing a circle. So you select detail view, you draw in a circle where you'd like to place the view, left click, and it creates a detail view. Okay, left click again where you'd like to place it. Very similar again to section view. Instead of a line, of course, we have a circle that references where we'd like the detail view to be. Okay. So that is detail views. The next one, real quickly, question, offset section. Offset section views, maybe believe me, aligned section views, what's often referred to as aligned section views, I believe. These are all things that we hope to have in the near future. Right now, as I mentioned before, horizontal and vertical section views are the option. Okay, so moving on, the next one in my list of topics is, of course, dimensions. So now that I've added all these views, how do I go in and add dimensions? And there's a number of different dimension types that I want to mention. So we're going to start from the left and kind of work our way to the right. And of course, we're going to start with the simple 2-point linear dimension, which is useful in a number of different situations. So I'm going to select 2-point linear dimension. I'll zoom in on the bottom view here, and I want to place a dimension between the two center points of these circles. So again, very similar to placing the detail view or the section view. As you move your cursor over the view, you're going to see these snap points appear in the drawing view. And these are references that you can select for your dimensions. And the neat thing about this is if you look really closely, they actually change shape. So a triangle, for instance, is the midpoint of an edge, where a square is the end point. A circle is the center point of a cylinder. So that red cursor is actually a cue as to what you're over, what you're hovering over. So in this case, I want a dimension between the two center points. I left click, then move the dimension where I'd like to place it, and left click again. Okay. So again, very straightforward. Left click to place the dimension. Okay. So 2-point linear dimensions can be used in a number of different examples that I have. You can do a number of different things. Quick question that's come up. Can I make the dimension lines and text in a different color? The answer is no, at least not yet. There's no support for anything color yet inside of an Onshape drawing, and that includes company logos, for instance. That's another common question that I get. Can I have a nice color logo in my drawing? That's something we're working on, but as of today, no. No color in Onshape drawings. Okay, so 2-point linear dimensions. Really, the 2-point linear dimension is kind of my go-to. It's the standard, so to speak, for pretty straightforward dimensions. Now, there will be situations where it's not the tool that you want to use. For instance, what if I wanted a dimension from a point parallel with an edge, for instance, of the model? If I did a 2-point linear dimension and select point, edge, it does not assume that I want it parallel with that edge. And so this is an example where point line is useful, which is the next icon over. So point edge, and notice the dimension is parallel with that line. Right? So that's really where it's useful. If you need a dimension that's parallel with an edge and it's not normal to X, Y, or Z, you'll use something like a point line or a line. Same idea, except of course 2 lines are your reference and the dimension is parallel to them. Okay, so both of these very similar, point line. The difference is, of course, in one the first selection is a point, then a line, whereas the second is 2 lines. But the key thing there is you want a dimension parallel to the selected entities, the selected lines. Question, can you insert break on the witness line where the dimensions are crossing the witness line? This is a good question. We cannot yet. Now I can manually pull the dimension reference lines, but it will not allow me to break. There's no function yet for breaking when 2 lines overlap, when 2 dimension lines overlap, for instance. So that's a good question. Again, something that we hope to have in the near future. Another question, is it possible to auto dimension, for instance, using dimensions in the 3D model? No, this is something that we hope to have very soon. This is something that we get probably asked more than most other drawing related questions. Okay, is there any way to just bring in all the dimensions from the 3D model? The answer is no, not yet, but definitely something that's on our list of priorities. Okay, so I've gone over the first 3 dimension types, 2-point, point line, and of course line. Now the next one is a line angular dimension, and the key difference here is, of course, this is an angle dimension. So I can select line, and I get the angle value between those lines. So definitely worth pointing out here, you have a separate angle dimension, and it's just a matter of selecting two lines that aren't parallel with each other, and you'll get an angular dimension. Now, question that's come up, can decimal places be changed? Absolutely. So you can change a number of different things in the dimension if you left click on it. And the key thing is if you move your cursor over the dimension, you're going to see a little sphere, a little dot pop up. If you left click on that, you're going to see a little box. Okay, so it's subtle, you have to pay close attention, but if you left click, move your cursor over this box, dimension properties flies out. And you can add anything you'd like here. The discussion was, the question was asked before, what if I wanted dual units? We don't necessarily have dual units yet, but what you could do is, of course, type in the units manually. Not a great workaround, but you can type in anything you'd like here, including, typical or 4x or a number of things that you see commonly in drawings. Another one is, of course, decimal precision. So you can set the number of decimals on an independent dimension here. You can also set tolerances. You can add symbols. You can add parentheses. So you have a number of different things that you can do, but the big thing here is dimension properties allow you to modify the text in the actual dimension dialog to add just about anything that you'd like. A question, can it be done globally? Can you change the units globally? And I'm quite certain, although not 100%, so forgive me, that is within the template that you're using. So in this case, is a 3 decimal template. I'm going to go over later on how we import templates and even walk you through that process, but I believe that is maintained within the template. Can we change angular dimensions into angle and minutes? I don't believe so, but I'm not, again, 100% certain. I don't think so. I think that may be a limitation. One thing that's been brought up in this, it's a good point. Although you can't change globally as a setting all the different unit lengths, you can window select, for instance, all your dimensions and set the precision of them all at once. So it's worth pointing out that it is rather fast. If I wanted to change all the dimensions in this drawing, I could just window select all of them and change the precision. So, it not necessarily globally as a setting, but it is still pretty quick. Okay, so moving on. We've covered angular dimensions. The main thing there is it's dependent on 2 lines, right? So you select 2 lines, you get an angular dimension. Can you change angles to decimal degrees? For instance, this dimension, forgive me, I'm not sure what you're referring to by decimal degrees. The default here is 29.8 degrees. Yeah. It is not showing it in minutes, and that's the common one. I'm not certain that we could do that yet. Forgive me if. So let's move on. The next one in my list is a 3-point angular dimension, and the big difference here is, like the name implies, instead of using 2 lines as a reference for your angle dimension, you can use 3 points. So I could select point, 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 and get an angle dimension between those 3 points. Very useful if you're trying to dimension, for instance, between 3 points of an arc, something along those lines where you don't easily have 2 lines to reference, but you have 3 points that make a good reference. Okay. Now the last 2, are pretty self-explanatory. We have radius and diameter dimensions. So pretty straightforward. Select radial dimension, select the radius, and it places it. Okay. As I mentioned before, you can edit any dimension. So I could come in, for instance, and say 2x, and add text to that dimension as well. Okay. Good question. How about arc length? You could do arc length in the model, but I'm not certain you could do arc length in a drawing yet. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a limitation as well. No arc length. Okay. Can you flip the radius arrow to show center? You cannot flip. Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding the question. Flip it about the reference. In this case, I've selected the arc, so it's attaching it to the arc. Not flip the actual arrow itself to the other side. By default, it will point to the outside of the arc always. Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding that. Okay, so that's a radial dimension. The next one is, of course, a diameter dimension, which is very similar, except the big difference is, of course, you get a diameter value. So diameter dimension, I left-click any circle, and then left-click to place the dimension. Okay. So that is the simple dimension tools. The key things with dimensions to keep in mind is, if you left-click a dimension and then mouse over that flyout, you have all the abilities to tweak, precision or add symbols or text or tolerances or really just about anything you'd like to do. This is another very good question. Can we change dimensions in the drawing and have it change in the 3D model or 3D drawing automatically? And the answer is no, but you can change the 3D model and have the drawing update automatically, which means it's a one direction thing. So the model changes. It's important to point out I cannot change the size of this from here. For instance, if I want to change the length, I'd have to go back to the part and then edit that dimension. Okay, so definitely worth pointing out, this is where we control the actual model. Okay. Another thing to point out, when you make a change, I just made a small change to the overall length of this, but when you make a change, when you go back to your drawing, you're going to see a little icon here that says Update Drawing. This was grayed out a moment ago. It recognizes changes at the part or assembly, and it recognizes the need to update the drawing. Now, there's a reason it doesn't update automatically. And remember, with Onshape, 2 or 3 people could be editing this document or this part even. So it is a button that you have to press. It's not going to automatically change if the part updates. And that was a deliberate decision just because of the dynamic nature of Onshape. So I select Update Drawing. It goes back and references the part and then pushes any changes to the part into my drawing. Okay, so you see the dimensions automatically update, but the big thing I want to point out there is you'll see the icon is available when the changes take place. But it is, a good point. We do all the part modeling in a part studio. You're not going to be changing dimensions, the value of a part, for instance, in a drawing tab. Okay, so moving on, we've covered all the different dimension types. Now we're going to get into some of the different annotations that are available to us. And the first one is just a simple datum. Very common way to define a reference edge, for instance, in a drawing is to reference with a datum. So you select datum, you select the label that you'd like, the type of datum that you'd like, and then select the entity you want to attach it to. So just left click, and place the datum. Okay. Relatively straightforward. It does auto increment, so if I do go back and add another datum, it recognizes that there was one before, and now I have a second one with B as my reference. Okay. So worth pointing out, you do have datum capabilities here, and you can grab and manipulate and pull them around and attach them to references of your part. You can even attach these, for instance, to geometric tolerance symbols as well. So pretty flexible in what you can use as a reference. So that's datums, and that also leads me into my next one, and that is geometric tolerance blocks. And so you select geometric tolerance, and then you very simply just walk through the type of tolerance that you want to define. So I could define concentricity, for instance, or if I wanted a dimension for, if I wanted a position tolerance for a dimension, for example. I can add any text that I'd like. So I can define text or a value, for instance. So let's say 0.03. I can define the class fit or the definition of the degree of tolerance that I'd like in this case, and I can have primary, secondary, and tertiary references. So very simple. Just go through and fill out all the different details that you like in your tolerance. Hit the green check, and it places a tolerance on your cursor. Okay, you can place it anywhere you'd like. So I can come down here and place it in the bottom left, for example. Anywhere in the drawing that I'd care for. Pretty straightforward geometric tolerance. Just go through and define all the different details of it, and then left click to actually place it. Question, how about circle U? You do not have circle U as an option. Another one, can you attach it to a dimension? This is another one that I'm fairly certain the answer is no, not at this moment. Of course, you can position it there, but it doesn't attach and move with it. Okay, so that's geometric tolerance. Moving on to notes. Very simple idea in that you really just want to add some text to your drawing. You select note. Let's say, for instance, I want to add some text in the bottom left corner. I can left click, and just type in, some text. You have options to set the font type. You have the options to set the font size. You have justification options, so I can center justify and middle align. I have bold, italics. I also have, line spacing options and so on. More paragraph style options. But the big thing I want to point out here is you can add simple text or notes to your drawing. This is currently how we fill out the title block as well. Now, some questions that come up is, well, what kind of font options do you have? What choices is there a way to pull from my current local fonts? And the answer is no. Right now, this is the list of fonts we have available, and there's a few reasons for it. The big one is licensing. These fonts are freely available. They can run on any machine, so they're not specific to a certain operating system. So we want to make the same list of fonts available wherever you're at. So freely available fonts, you have those to choose from. You can set any font size that you'd like, and then green check to place. Question that's come up. Forgive me for not catching this earlier. Can you insert part properties like part number, view scale, mass into the text field that changes when the file is changed? And the answer is no, not yet. These are not linked. Now you can insert notes, of course, for the title, and I can attach the note here and type in suspension bracket. But you cannot link this. This is not linked to the part name that if I changed it automatically updates. And I think that's the commonly asked question. That's something that, again, that we're working on. That's something that's very important to us, is automatically filling out all the elements of the title block based on details of, the user, the document, and so on. Okay. So no, not yet, but something that's very important, I would say. And the other thing I want to point out is, you're going to see with the upcoming update and the future updates is drawings in particular, is a very important focus for us. So you're going to see a lot of new drawings things coming soon. But that's notes. Again, you can attach it and center it inside of your title block, which aids a little bit in positioning it, and then type in the text to actually place it. So we have typical notes that are great for attaching to title blocks or different entities along those lines, but what if I want to attach a reference or a leader to the model or to a drawing view, for instance? And that's a note with leader. So you select note with leader, and the main difference here is the first step is to first define where you want to attach the leader. All right, so I move my cursor over the edge, left click, and then type. All right, we'll say deburr edges. So very similar options to the note we were looking at just a second ago. The only real difference here is you have to first define the leader and its length, and then type in your text. Okay, green check, and it adds a note with a leader. So pretty straightforward. The next one in the list is a general table. Now we don't yet have automated bill of materials tools, but we do have a general table that can be inserted into your drawing. And this is useful for a number of different situations. It still needs to be manually populated, but very nice if you want to fill out, whole positions, for instance, if I had a, small parts list that I wanted to build together in a table. The way it works is you select table, you select the number of rows and columns, whether or not you want a title or header row. Then you left click to define the top left corner, then move your cursor out to define the height and width of the table. Left click again, and it places it. Okay, then you can start typing in your text and filling out the table. As I mentioned before, it's still manually filled out. This is, an area which, of course, we hope to approve very soon. But it is a simple table functionality that allows you to go in and, whatever purpose that you have for inserting a table, you can do that. Okay. Some questions that come up with, in particular, to tables. Really, inside of each one, if you left click, you can set options like inserting rows or columns, deleting rows or columns. If you select multiple, you can do things like merge them. So it is familiar, table-like behavior. If you've come from other, I don't want to say Excel, but Excel-like behavior where you can edit and insert and things like that. The key thing is, select the actual cell or, select a series of cells and you see the edit table dialog pop up giving you all those options. Okay. A question that's come up: how can we mention the roughness of a surface? Right now, it would probably have to come in the form of the note with leader. I do not believe that we'd have that in the tolerance symbol. So just off the top of my head, I would say a note with leader defining that. How to get the symbol into the note might be a little bit tricky, and that's a good point. This is a good point. This is a question from earlier. Regarding flipping the radius arrow, it looks like it's dependent on the drawing template. I just tested it on the ISO template, and the radius arrow is extended to show the center of the radius. This is a good point. I'm in an ANSI template. A bent leaders is another good example of that, where in this ANSI template, I have a bent leader for my arrow. There is differences in the arrow style, the dimension style, all those details when you go from ISO to ANSI templates. So much of those settings are controlled by the type of template that you're using. So very good point. This is another good one. Geometric tolerance should have something for surface finish. Okay, so geometric tolerance, surface finish is definitely something that should be there. Any way to save a general table or a set of standard notes as a block or template so that they need to be created from scratch every time? Right now, there's no way to customize the template in Onshape. The question might be if I embed the table in the template and then use that as a template in Onshape, does it carry over? And that's something I haven't tried myself. What I would say is, I'm going to show you in a bit how you can, download the templates and tweak them in a 2D CAD tool. If you tried embedding the template into that, or the table into that template, and then try using that, that's something I would try. Okay. When do we anticipate having bombs? And this is something that I would say is probably one of the more commonly asked questions. It's something that's very high on our list of priorities. I can't give you a date because I don't have one, but realize that it's very, very high on our list of priorities. I think you'll see a number of different bomb solutions with the App Store that's coming very soon, and integrated solutions, or a click button solution inside of Onshape Drawing. So these are all things that we hope to have very soon. But I can't give you a week, a month, a timeline yet. Something that's worth pointing out about our workflow in general is that roughly every 3 weeks we reevaluate the needs and change priorities based on user feedback. So our the updated functionality, it's the decisions are constantly being changed based on the priority levels at that moment. Okay, so moving on, I think we've covered almost all of the annotations. General tables, as I mentioned before, is really just a blank table, but allows you to go in and fill things out and merge and do all the stuff you're used to. The last few annotations that I have are really more construction than anything else. The question came up before, how do I handle things like an axis, or I just want to have a construction line referencing the center of a circle, for example. And you can do this a number of different ways. We have two different types. You have a 2-point center line. So you select 2-point center line. It's very similar to drawing a line in a sketch in a part. So you left click, and you have your 2-point center line. Okay, so 2 points, 2 clicks. You can drag and resize it. Okay, so if you decide afterwards that it's not long enough or you need to change it, you can grab one of the end points and manipulate it. Okay, so that's a 2-point center line. I've already kind of given you a preview of the line-to-line center line. Like the name implies, you select the command, you select 2 lines, and it gives you a center line between them. The neat thing about this is it's referencing those edges of the model, so if they change, it updates. And the other neat thing about this is if you don't have an easy point to reference for the 2-point center line, so there will be a situation where I can't click on the other end because it's not visible in that view. Line-to-line center line is the answer there. So use that form of a center line. And the last one is just a simple circle tool, center mark tool. So select center mark, select any circle or arc. Right. So I have no center mark in the center of this hole. Just left click, and it places the center mark. Okay, real simple command. Just left click any arc or circle. Okay. So that is center marks. The last command, or the last annotation, I should say, is line. And this is, more if you're just drawing, if you just need a general line tool. If I just want to draw a line from point to point for whatever reason, for whatever need that I have. Okay. So again, the Onshape drawings are really built around the idea that you're documenting your 3D model. You're not really creating geometry in the drawings. You're more annotating it and dimensioning it and referencing it. Okay. All right, so those are all the different annotation types. The last icon that I want to point out here is Refine Graphics. It's in the top right corner. You may notice from time to time that as you zoom in real tight on a circle, for instance, you start to kind of see the polygons or the jagged edges of a circle, and it's just tessellation, based on the drawing resolution. You can refine that. You can control that. It's very useful if you're trying to grab, for instance, a PDF or a screenshot of a very clean, up close look at a drawing view. You can refine the graphics. Now, most of the time, it's not necessary. It's really more one of those things I might do right before I grab a screenshot or right before I save a PDF. Now, one thing you won't see in your toolbar is this release number. It's more of an internal number, so don't worry about it too much. It's just for us to track what version of drawings we're currently using. So that's really it in terms of the functionality and things like that. Real quick question here. Are all dimensions and center ticks automatically scaled to fit the geometry? This is a good question. I believe yes. I don't believe that's going to be controlled by the template. I think that's going to be controlled by the actual size of the drawing that you're using. So A, B, C, D, so on. And the same thing goes, by the way, for the default view scale. So the default view scale when you first insert views is going to be dependent on the size of the model and the size of the drawing view that you're doing. Okay, so I've covered nearly everything in the toolbar. The last thing I want to mention, ironically enough, it's the first button in the toolbar, and that is Sheets. So the question often comes up, well, do I need to create another tab for another drawing? And the answer is no. You can create as many sheets as you'd like. So you can select Sheets, you can hit Add Sheet, and it adds sheet number 2, and you'll see now I have a blank sheet. What's worth pointing out is notice the title block is different. That's, of course, because in this template, this is the second sheet. So it's important to point out if you have 2 sheets in your template and they have 2 different title blocks or different layouts, you can have that in Onshape as well. So, and I can jump back to sheet 1 just by left clicking, and it brings everything back. So you can have as many sheets as you like, and you don't need to have multiple tabs for each piece of it. Okay. If you change the scale of the view, will the dimensions update? The dimensions, of course, won't change, but well, let's just try it now. And I don't believe they're going to change size with it. Let's go back to 1. No, they do not. So the dimensions will not change size to match the scale of the drawing. Okay. Okay, so that's multiple sheets. Definitely one thing I want to point out, you don't have to go in and create individual tabs for each drawing. Okay. A question that's come up, can you put the refined graphics in the sketch screen when making models? Absolutely. That's something that we've looked at before. In general, ideally what we'd like to do is just have this not be necessary at all. Okay, that's the ultimate solution here, is just to eliminate the need for this in general. And that's something we hope to do both at the drawing level and at the sketch level, the part level, and the assembly level in Onshape as well. In an assembly, does a section view show different hatching for different parts? I believe the answer is yes. Not 100%, but almost 100% on that. Okay. Okay, so moving on, the last things I really wanted to mention here today are the idea of custom templates and importing and exporting. So what I'd like to do is first walk you through exporting. So you've taken the time to build this drawing, and now you want to show it to someone. You need to share it with someone. The first thing I want to point out here is sharing your document is as easy as anything else. So if you're commonly sending PDFs to someone, right, or if you're commonly attaching a DXF in it, to an email, for instance, and sending it to someone, realize you can also share your document. Okay, so you can hit share, just type in their email address. Okay, define their permissions. So if it's the shop floor, for instance, and I only want them to view, I'll say can view, and then hit share. Even if they don't have an Onshape account, we'll create one on the fly. They can log into it, and now they can see the same drawing you can. So it's worth pointing out you don't have to do the typical download as a DXF, attach to an email, send to someone. You can just share your document with them. Okay? They can even see this from their Android phone or their iPhone or anything along those lines. Now, if you want to download this drawing, as I mentioned before, you really have 3 different options. You can right-click the drawing tab at the very bottom, and you have PDF, DXF, and DWG. Okay, so you have the 3 different options. You can specify where you want to save the DXF, and it saves it, or PDF, by the way, or a number of different formats. So right-click the tab is where you have the options for export. Our drawings available on the beta version of Onshape. We are out of the beta version. The beta version is no more. So as of just a few weeks ago, about a month now, we now have our first commercial release. So we are formally out of beta. Another question. So I assume you just rename the tab to give the drawing a unique name. Absolutely. You can rename the tab by just right-clicking. You'll see the rename option here. You can also rename individual sheets So, if you have multiple sheets in your drawing, you can go through and rename them so the names make a bit more sense. Okay, so that's exporting. As I mentioned before, just right-click the tab, choose the format you want to export to. Pretty straightforward. Importing, again, very straightforward. The important thing to keep in mind with importing is when you import a DXF or DWG, it creates an Onshape drawing out of it. So you're going to see two tabs created. Okay, so let's walk you through this now. Very similar to creating a drawing. To import a drawing, you select the plus icon and choose Import. Then browse to the file you'd like to import. In this case, the DXF. I hit Open, and it imports the DXF. Okay, so you're going to see two tabs, the original DXF and the drawing. Right, this is the translated, visible, and Onshape drawing, and you can even come in and edit and manipulate the drawing. Okay, so we can import DXF and DWGs. You can even edit them natively. If you have a library of DXF and DWGs you want to share with users, Onshape is a great way to do it. But the main thing is we can import them. That's the thing I want to point out there. Question is step to print. You can print under the document menu. Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding. So under the document menu in the top left here, you'll see the option to print. Is there a setting to stop it from importing the original DXF? Oh, so if I was batch importing. So if I'm importing dozens of DXFs at once and I don't want it to create the tab, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding that. I believe that's going to be a limitation. Right now it creates a tab specific to the .dxf. You don't have to keep it, but if you're doing a lot of importing, you still have to go through and delete it. I don't think there's a way to tell it not to create a tab at the moment. Can you change the background colors? No, not at the moment. It's dependent on the way it was modeled. In this case, this DXF, the background is the black. Okay, so that's import. I've discussed export already. The last thing I want to mention, I have just a few minutes left, and that is custom templates. So as I mentioned before, we can't create custom templates yet inside of Onshape, and that's something we're working on, the ability to build your own template inside of Onshape. What we can do is read in already existing templates from a traditional 2D CAD system. So if you have a .dwt file from AutoCAD, from DraftSight, from ARES, or from some standard 2D CAD tool, you can import that into Onshape and use it as your template. What I'd like to do is walk you through that process and also give you a tip if you don't have a template on something you can do, some starting point that we give you. So let me jump back here to the documents page, and what I'd like to do is do first a search. I'm just going to do a search for ANSI. What I want to point out here is that we do have templates for you to download. So if you don't have any DWT files, you've never created a template before, or if you haven't created one, at least in DWT format, you can download these. And these are the same templates that I was just showing you a moment ago. These are the Onshape provided templates, and you can right click and download them. Now, from this point, you'll need to take it into your 2D CAD tool of choice. So if it's AutoCAD or ARES or DraftSight, and modify it. And so that's really where the modification of the template is done. The question was asked earlier, what can I add a template, or can I add a table as a default so it's always there? That's something I might try adding to the template in one of those 2D CAD tools. And then we can import that template back into Onshape. But the thing I wanted to point out with this is you can download the DWT files that we use as the default templates. So if you have nothing at all, this is a good place to start. But now let's say you've done that. You've downloaded DWT, you've opened it in AutoCAD or DraftSight, you've customized it, and now you're ready to read it into Onshape and use it as your template. How does that process work? And so really what it is you import the DWT into a document. Any DWT in a document will automatically get the option as a custom template. just as in general recommendation, just something I'd like to do for organization is I create a document called drawing templates. Now, this isn't a rule. It's just something that for organization makes sense. You can import a DWT into any template that you'd like, or any document that you'd like. So now I have drawing templates, and what I'd like to do is just import my DWT. Okay. So I import the DWT. I can just delete the Part Studio and Assembly that get created by default. Really, all I care about in this document are my templates. Right? It's just a place to store my templates. And now, when I go back and open up any of my parts, I'll have a custom option or a my option. So when I go to create, you'll see my templates. And you'll see there's the my custom ANSI C template that I just imported. Okay. Again, the important thing to point out, we're not doing the customization of the template in Onshape. You're doing that in your own and AutoCAD or DraftSite, but we can read those files in. Okay. So I hit OK, and now I'm using my custom ANSI C template. All right. Some questions that come up. What information is contained in the template? Things like projection types or arrow styles or leader styles or dimension size. All of these types of things, a lot of the annotation elements that make up a drawing, things like dimensions and the view styles and the projection styles, all of that's dictated by the template. So it really depends, what kind of work you're doing. And a lot of times there's a standard involved. So the ANSI standard, for instance, has bent leaders for arrows, and so you're gonna fall in line. So oftentimes with one of those standards. Okay, so that is what I had planned. We're just a few minutes over, so forgive me. Going forward, if you're just getting into Onshape, we really encourage you to try Onshape in your professional work and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your feedback. There's a feedback mechanism built into Onshape. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for you to give us feedback on what you think of it. The other thing to keep in mind is inviting others and sharing your document. It's very easy to collaborate with others, and there's a number of big benefits to it. So try sharing your document with others. I've walked you through it just a moment ago. The last thing to mention, if you're interested in establishing a user group, maybe you're interested in meeting local users, you've been using it for a while, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you set up and run your user group. So that's really what I have. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that you have. So again, feel free to type them in. But that's it, everyone. Thank you, and have a good day.